Well, good morning.
Good morning.
We are here today with a very special interview. We are so honored to have Nancy Kern Eaton here. She is president of the United Way of Central New York and here to talk to us about what this organization is doing, what she's doing, and the best way to do that, I think, is let's find out what normally you would be doing in normal days. So we'll go back to 4, 5, 6 weeks ago. Pick any day you'd like and let us know what services you'd be offering and what you'd be doing on a typical day.
Thanks for the opportunity. I love the idea of featuring and talking about empathy anytime, but especially during this time. You know, United Way in this community has a wonderful history, which is that it began in 1917 when the mayor of Syracuse called together 100 community leaders to present what he called his war plan for fighting poverty and need. He, I think, knew, I've often said, you know, his heart was hurting because he saw people in need and he realized that government couldn't do it alone. And he invited these community leaders to join him in creating a fund into which community members could invest, contribute whatever they had. And then because folks were investing together, there would be this pool of funds that could then be strategically used to make sure that whatever someone's need, there were programs available to help them. And I feel very proud, and I know our board members and our volunteers and our staff share that pride, in a way standing on the shoulders of the people who founded this sort of movement in Central New York that many years ago. At the time, the mayor's goal was to raise $600,000, which even now is a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, in 3 weeks, that group of 100 people gave over 400 presentations. They raised over $1.1 million.
Wow.
And that's what this community did way back then. We, ever since, have invited the community to invest in this pool of resources that we could then use to address needs in this community. And I think what I would say to you in terms of right now and what I was doing 6 weeks or 6 months ago is really in many ways the same, which is that we support the network of services that ensure we're focusing on every person in our community and their well-being. So whether it's a baby being born and being sure that the supports are there for the parents and for that child to reach kindergarten ready to succeed, or whether it's someone in the later years of their life and wanting to ensure that they have the highest possible quality of life, we want to, and through the community's generosity, we've been able to support this network of services. So on a typical day prior to this time we find ourselves in, I would have the privilege of connecting with programs throughout the community, checking in on what's happening, what they're seeing, the services they're delivering, and we have some amazing, amazing organizations in this community. I would have the privilege to work every day with a dedicated team, a small but mighty team, who shared this commitment to ensuring that people in our community get help when they need it. And you know, so often people find themselves in need who maybe never imagined they would be in need. And certainly now that's true in ways it never was before. And at United Way, we want to make sure that whatever help you need today, it's here for you. And even more importantly, we want to help you find your pathway to a tomorrow that doesn't include the crisis you're dealing with today. And we really have been honored to work with businesses throughout the community who invite us to come in and share this mission with their employees. And again, the wonderful thing about what someone can do through United Way is that whether they can give $1 a paycheck, $5 a paycheck, because it all goes into this one fund, it means an awful lot, right? And so some people say a little change can change a lot. And certainly with United Way, that's something we've been able to do. And it's been a privilege to be part of this organization in this role. And I've been a supporter since I started working a very long time ago. And we have an amazing board of directors. So again, you know, a typical day for me now and then, before we were in this time, would be interacting with board members from across the community who share this commitment. So I feel very, very fortunate to have the opportunity to um, be part of this network of human services now more than ever. And what I would say to you is, in terms of how my day has changed now compared to prior to this time, what I think is important for the community to know is that because we had this network of services in place, we've been able to respond to these challenging days. We have a government that works more than ever before with our human service organizations. And so it isn't as if we had to sort of figure out who's who, right? And who could do what, or convince anyone that working together is the most effective way to do things. We're doing that in this community. And I could not be more proud of what we have been able to do so far during this time. As you may know, we have created, in partnership with the Central New York Community Foundation, the Allen Foundation, Reisman Foundation, county and city governments, the COVID-19 Community Support Fund. So what we saw from the beginning was this was going to be a big challenge, that it was going to impact people in very real ways, and that we knew that our human service organizations that are always on the front line, I think that's the thing that's so important to remember, is the people doing this work now were doing it 6 months ago.
Right.
And a year ago. They may be doing it in different ways right now, and they've certainly seen needs far greater than we've seen. Yet they were there, and they're, in my view, just as our healthcare workers and our first responders, these caring, committed professionals in our human service organizations are heroes too. So because this network was here, and because we came together to say, we know we're going to have increased need, we know there's going to be additional stress and additional expense to the organization, to organizations that are going to respond, we need to have a fund so that the money isn't the issue, right? Figuring out how to deliver services during this time is certainly a challenge. And again, our community, we could not be more fortunate. I've often said, I didn't grow up here, but I've often said, this community for me is perfect. We have a city that's big enough that there are so many things to do, and such a rich arts community and beautiful nature everywhere around. And yet it's not such a big city that folks are anonymous or invisible. We know our community, we know our neighborhoods, we know, and people matter here, right? I mean, people matter everywhere, but I think people feel more connected here. So we will get through this. It's certainly a time when I think people are feeling very stressed. And one of the things in United Way that we talk often about, and this has been an ongoing thing, so this isn't new for us, is people who are living paycheck to paycheck, just getting by, right? Working so hard. Some people 2 and 3 jobs to make it. And yet it's still hard to make. You know, one unexpected expense topples everything. If someone, for example, if their car breaks and needs $1,000 worth of work, do they fix the car so they can go to their job? But then how do they pay their rent or groceries, right? And in the United Way world, we have a phrase for how we describe people who live in that situation. We say ALICE. So ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. So many people might say the working poor. I don't really like that
Yeah.
expression very much. And we talk about ALICE, and we have many people in our community were ALICE before this current challenge, and many more people are ALICE now.
Right. Right. So a couple things that you are in such a unique situation in this, in that the United Way has always probably sat back and reassessed what's needed. So there's an automatic adaptation that's already incorporated into United Way. So what's needed now, and looking around the community. So this was a simple move for you probably, in that, now it's just a different situation. So what's needed now? And then being able to help, in directive and funding for the frontline, all the service organizations who are frontline, and being able to maybe assist and collaborate and point in, these are the new things needed right now. Let's move on these. So that's an amazing perspective, an amazing global perspective that it makes you different than all of us sitting back. This is my new today. Now what do I do with it? So that's incredible and wonderful that you come in with that whole aspect of it.
As I said, I really feel privileged. It is amazing to have an opportunity to connect with so many people whose mission and whose life is dedicated to helping other people. It really is an honor and a
Isn't
privilege.
it? Yeah.
What I would say to you, for example, when we all recognized this was a big deal and it was going to really sort of challenge us in new ways, Ann Rooney, who's the Deputy County Executive for Human Services, called and said, can we mobilize Volunteer CNY so that all people who want to volunteer to help can do it through United Way? Will you coordinate that? And I said, of course. We've always had Volunteer CNY. We're happy to do that. Within a couple of days, over 250 people had registered and wanted to help. We now have about 350 people registered. One of the challenges has been, first of all, many of the people registering to help are senior citizens. And of course, during this time, we need our seniors to stay home. And that's very hard for them in particular, because they're the folks who've always helped. I mean, these are people who have always stepped up to say, how can we help? The other part that's challenging that we've had to really think through how we talk with folks is, in many ways, there aren't a lot of volunteer opportunities right now. And Kristen, in times of crisis, we want to be together, right? So I think our human nature, and especially Central New Yorkers, we want to be together during crisis. And I will tell you, I had the honor of being part of the Salvation Army team years ago that coordinated a huge food preparation at the On Center, where we had, I think it was 2,500 people came, and we packed bags of rice and beans to send to other countries and places in the world where they had had natural disasters. We had the music playing and everybody had their hairnets on or their baseball caps. And it was an amazing feeling of community. And I know that's what people want more than anything now, right? Is that feeling of community. And yet we can't do that. That would be the worst possible thing in the world for us to do, is have these large gatherings of people. So what we've tried to do is say, if you're a blood donor, or if you can be a blood donor, please do that. The Red Cross is in desperate need of blood. We've also encouraged people to stay home and know that we will call you when we have a volunteer opportunity. And about 150 folks who signed up are being used in various ways now. Meals on Wheels, we've helped coordinate a lot of volunteers with them, because again, many of their volunteers are older folks.
Yeah.
And as hard as it's been, I think, for the older folks to realize they should be staying home, I think Meals on Wheels has done an amazing job of encouraging them to know that at some point they'll be back connecting with the people they deliver to and have relationships with. And for right now, we need all of them to be safe.
Yeah.
I will share that certainly one thing that's been a challenge is to think about, first of all, kids aren't in school. That means many children across our county, but particularly in Syracuse, who got breakfast and lunch at school, and some kids went to after school programs where they got dinner. They're home, right? And so parents who really had budgets that were already stretched, now we're trying to provide meals for the children who are home. And the school district has done a wonderful job of coordinating. Again, our community came together to try to think about how can we get food to the kids and their families. And that's been a big effort, thinking through how are the children in our community getting food and their families. And then also thinking about what about seniors who aren't able to get out to get food? How is that being coordinated? And again, I will tell you that immediately the county sort of created this task force, if you will, right? So we have kind of this adult food distribution task force that has people from the county and the city. I'm privileged to be part of it, as well as the frontline nonprofit organizations. And it was so impressive to see how the county has organized the efforts and thought about managing each issue as it has come up. So when we realize, oh my gosh, what about adults who aren't in a system, right? They maybe haven't been receiving services and yet they need them now. Immediately a phone line was created, and we started through the county task force taking names and thinking through how do we get meals and food. Immediately at the same time, the county wisely looked to see of the sort of the licensed kitchens that we already have making food and providing food at our soup kitchens, right, in our shelters. What would their capacity be to increase the number of meals they made, and what kind of supports would they need for that? Which to me was a reflection of the way we work together here. Right? We say, and that's really, if you wanted to partly summarize what United Way is all about, we're always looking at needs in our community, and then we're thinking through how can we work together, right? So when it's literacy, 10 years ago, the Literacy Coalition of Onondaga County came together because we realized don't really need a new nonprofit. What we need is people all thinking together who have an ability to do something about literacy. And so many other efforts have come using that same sort of strategy around, we have an issue in our community, let's bring together anyone who could play a role in making a difference, and then let's kind of come up with some solutions to get people past whatever that challenge is. So the Early Childhood Alliance formed because we wanted to ensure that every child born in our community reaches kindergarten ready to be successful. It's an amazing coalition of pediatricians, educators, human service organizations, the business community. I'm very proud that United Way is sort of the home, but the truth of it is, again, it's a coalition of people who've all come together around an issue of importance for people living in our community.
So that is empathy. You are creating the connections. You are making the relationships and putting people together to make something happen. So, that's an automatic for you of incorporating empathy into everything you do. You're listening to the needs, and then you're putting the groups together to make it happen. It's beautiful. It's all the connection.
I think what's wonderful about United Way is that it's anyone in the community who wants to help others, right, in whatever way they can. And again, I have to tell you, I've had so many moments where my heart just sings, listen, talking to folks. For example, cashiers at Wegmans. And Wegmans has an incredibly high percentage of their employees who contribute to United Way from their paychecks. And I've talked to cashiers at Wegmans and said, I work at United Way, I just want to say thank you. And I've had cashiers say to me, I give $10 from my paycheck every time. And I just think, wow, cashiers aren't the richest people in our community. I mean, I know Wegmans is an amazing employer, and yet I also know cashiers are folks who probably need the money they earn. And yet they tell me proudly that they contribute because they really understand what it means. And, you know, I think of so many people who've shared their stories. For example, a couple who the husband is an engineer, the wife is, I think she's a teacher, and they feel very blessed, right? They have a nice income. Money certainly is not something that's a stress in their lives. They have a beautiful home. They had their first child. Life was great. They had a little boy. They gave to United Way because they felt it was the right thing to do. You know, that you help others who are in need. And then they had their second child, and something seemed so different than their first child. And they thought, well, every kid's different, right? And yet, boy, things were different. Ultimately, what they realized was that their second son has autism, and they needed help to learn how can we be the best parents possible to help our son thrive and live his best life. And they realized that need was more than money, that need could be much more than being poor or having an emergency situation happen in your life. And those kinds of situations happen all the time. And I think we as a community want people to get the help they need. And that's why I believe with all my heart in United Way, because really what we want to do is to ensure that no one is left behind. And it's not easy. I mean, when you think about our community and the changes in our economy before this current time, the manufacturing that has gone away from our community, and how folks are working hard to think through this sort of new economy and the new ways. And I'm proud to be on the board of Center State, which is doing such great work with a regional approach to business and economic development, and also really focusing on inclusion. So making sure that we really think about the ways in which current systems keep people out of some economic opportunity. And that's really, really important. So as we're looking at these times, I think that it allows us to highlight things we've worked on all along. And I try every day when I am heading home, because I'm the one who comes to the office every day. We have everyone working remotely, and I'm sort of trying to do it here. What have I learned today? You know, what has today helped me to understand that I can use going forward? And there are so many things. And I know we have sort of our COVID community support fund. We have Zoom meetings a couple of times a week for 2.5 hours to review any of the applications that have come in. And we're being so thoughtful and really careful in thinking through how we're using this money that the community has entrusted to us. And we're also realizing there are new ways to coordinate efforts and for people to collaborate. And good usually comes from challenge, right? And so we know we're going to learn things, and we will take some lessons from this that I believe will make our community stronger, and this has brought people together in new ways. And I try to think about those things when I hear about yet another challenge that I think, oh no, what are we going to do about this? I realize that in many ways, there will be gifts from this time, for sure.
That's right. One of the things I teach in empathy is the importance of reflection. And I love that you put that in there because it is so important at the end of the day to reflect back and with no judgment, just what happened today and what can I take forward with me. Something that you made me think of several years ago when I started really researching what Syracuse had, what service organizations were out there. I I was amazed every single day about what people were doing. And I think anyone who has doubts about Syracuse really, just like you and me, just needs to look around and really pay attention and see all of the very small one person nonprofit service organizations, all the way up to the people who are on the front lines for the homeless and for the people who need food and services. And it's amazing how many groups are out there and how many people are doing things, and then also how much hope that gives you. And that hope, I think, is really what's going to bring us through this, and know that at the end of this, that we will be taking gifts from it, and that new connections are being made and new relationships that we can take forward to make it even better. Regarding your volunteers, a lot of what I'm promoting these days is, in order to stay away from that whole fear, scare, everything that's so easy to get caught up in, everybody needs a purpose. And just finding that purpose for how to do something for someone else during this time can make such a difference. And there are things to do. There are ways, obviously you can donate money, knowing where it's going and what it's going to, but also just
Right.
the notes and the support, and which you can do so easily these days, through social media and through email and such, but just letting people know that we're thinking of them and that we're there and that we're supporting, making that connection is so important these days to the people who are in this whole process of the struggle every single day. For them, it's no before and after right now, it's in the midst. And so I think finding that purpose is huge, and taking that hope forward. So I truly appreciate everything that you're saying today. You're bringing it all together. Is there something that you would like to add, put out there, just something to share before we end the interview?
Yes, thanks. I think one thing would be, I agree with you that hope is just so important, right? You do have to have this sense that good times are coming, right? That something better is coming. I remember as a teenager, sort of remember the intensity of those feelings, and you think like, it's always going to be this bad. And as an adult, I've often said to young people, I wish I could help young people realize it really won't always feel this bad. And honestly, we have suicide is a big issue that we had just started to really work on. And of course, now we have this current challenge, and I'm hopeful folks will reach out. I know we're getting more and more mental health calls. I know you're helping highlight 211 as a resource for people. And what I would say is, and I've always said this, and it's more true now than ever before, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, someone will answer the phone, and they can, at 211. And I often say, my problems seem hardest at 2 a.m, right? I mean, sort of you're awake and you have this on your mind and you're struggling. Call 211. They're there, they're awake, they want to help you. Contact Community Services does a great job. That's who we contract with for the 211 service. And they do an amazing job. They also have the mental health hotline. They're a national suicide prevention hotline. So they have folks really trained to help people who are feeling stress. And I do think you're so right in terms of reaching out. I miss having our staff here. And I have to tell you, I think in some ways they're working harder than ever. And so I actually send out a message to the staff every day via email that because we're at 980 James Street, I call it the 980 Daily. And what I've tried to do is sort of share updates on what's happening and things I'm doing as part of this COVID response, but more importantly, just sort of encouraging them to use this time and to think about this time and how we can reach out to folks. And early on, I think the first week, to be honest, I really laid awake all night one night, and just sort of my mind kept sort of spinning about all the people and who was losing jobs and how we were going to help them, and people who were in shelters and how we were going to deal with that, with this virus and all of those things. And then all the volunteers wanted to do something, and they were struggling because they really wanted to do something. And I thought, so I put together this 10 things to do while you're shut in during a pandemic list that I shared with our team. But, as I thought about it, I thought, call people, right? So if you know senior citizens, call them. And if you're blessed to have grandparents still alive, call them and ask them to share their childhood memories. And I said, how far back can you do your family tree? If you think about it, right? This is the perfect opportunity to call the older folks in your life and say, how far back can we go, and where was that person born, and what year was that person born? And maybe if you have children at home, have them do a little research on what would life have been like in the 1920s or the late 1800s before someone came over to this country. So there's just so many ways, I think. And I said, I thought about challenging kids to find a new inspiring quote every day, and talk about why they pick that quote, why they think that's inspiring, and maybe do a little research on the person who said that. I think there are things we can do to sort of boost each other up and stay connected. I know for me, my husband and I are blessed to have 5 grandchildren who are 3 and under.
Oh, wow.
And we can't see them. 3 of them don't even live in the area, but we can't see the 2 that do. So we've been doing FaceTime and finding our new rhythm of how we connect. And I know for many people, but I often have thought, imagine 1918 when they faced that awful time, and they had no ways to communicate really, and they didn't. So we're fortunate, I guess, right, that we have everything we have now, so we can stay connected and we can make sure people are doing well, and we have much to offer, and a community that's doing it together.
That's right.
So, and we really, this is a wonderful community, and we will continue to work together to support families and children and to help folks who, and I just have to say, for anyone who's feeling pessimistic or feeling like we're not going to make it through this, we have incredible leaders, the county executive and his team, the mayor and his team, all of our nonprofits. They've pivoted, right? I think that's the way to describe it. We've pivoted. So this network of services that United Way has always been able to support because of the community, we've pivoted. And I'll share one story just as an example, as my final comment. I reached out. So United Way right now provides financial support to 87 different programs at 33 local agencies. And as I said, sort of that whole gamut of human services. And I reached out to our agencies to say, we'd love to know how you're operating. Is your staff still able to provide the services? And I'm sure they've had to modify how they do that. And we'd love to hear the stories of how that's happening. And so one of the people who works at Hillside with a young man who struggles a lot with anxiety and depression all the time, is really struggling now, right? If you're a worrier, now we have a pandemic, so for heaven's sake, if there really is something to worry about. And she had done work with him in art to have him, before this time, use art as a way to express his feelings and really work through feelings. And she asked him if he was able to do that now, and he said he had really been struggling. So she encouraged him to think about maybe creating a comic book, to sort of think about it. So I love that he decided, since adults seem to be obsessed about toilet paper,
Oh, no.
he created Super Toilet Paper Man,
Oh,
who's the hero.
yeah.
And his hero is battling against the evil Mr. COVID.
Okay.
So I love that this dedicated human service professional is connecting with this young guy, keeping him supported and helping him work through this very unusual time in a way that makes me feel pretty darn hopeful, because Mr. Super Toilet Paper Man is going to win.
That's right. Absolutely. I love it. Well, thank you so much for taking your time today. It's been amazing. I love the way your mind works. I think putting out there about the connection and the hope of everyone working together is so important right now. And I think we can all develop that hope, share that hope, pass it on to every single person we see, everyone we deal with, and we will get through this stronger.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take good
Take
care.
care. I'll talk to you on the other side of this
There we go.
pandemic, and we'll see how we're doing then.
I think we should have a celebration for all of the heroes.
I love it. Sounds good. Okay.
Take care, Kristen.